Boker Tov, today's daf yomi is dedicated to a Yeshua for Am Yisrael, a refuah for the Chayalim, a Yeshua for the Chayalim, a Hatzalah for those who are captive, the Shvuyim. May Hashem guard over everyone and give a Yeshua for Am Yisrael. We're going to start on Samachal from a base on 61b, 4 lines from the bottom. Today's daf yomi is 62. And so the daf yomi is a lot in here. Today's daf. Tana Rabbanan Hamadlik es HaKadish. Somebody burned somebody else's stacks on fire. V'hayu bo kelim. And the person had utensils in them. V'dolku. And because Reuven burned Shimon's stacks, Shimon's utensils are in them. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mishalem kol ma'ashahayu b'socho. That Rabbi Yehuda says that the person who burned to start the fire, he has to pay for the utensils that were hidden in there. No, you just pay for the stack. If it was a stack of wheat, you pay for the stack of wheat. The barley, the rowan makom kalim, and the place where the utensils were, all you do is you look at it, as though it was grain, and you don't view it as the utensil. Chum say you don't pay for a utensil that was hidden. This is the law that we've discussed many times in this first 61 pages of the tractate called Tamun Ba'esh, something that's hidden when the fire comes and burns it. But, says the Gemara on the top of Samach Ba'ezim et Al Pamed Var Mamurim, when do we say this? Halacha b'madlich b'toch shalo. Only in a circumstance where he lights it in his own field. And then it goes, the fire spreads into his friend's field. But if he started from the beginning and lit it in his friend's field, then then even according to the Chachamim, he would have to pay for everything. So when do the Rabbanan say you're exempt for Tamam Ba'esh? Only if you start the fire in your field and it traveled to your friend's field. But if you start in your friend's field, you're going to be chayev for Tamam Ba'esh. But even Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're liable for Tamam Ba'esh, he'll admit to the Chachamim that you're potter in a circumstance, where you lend something, you lend space to your friend, to put a stack of grain, and he put a stack of grain, and he hid something. So under that circumstance, where you gave to the space to your friend only for a stack of grain, and he hid his utensils in there, Rabbi Yehuda would admit, to make it mishbalvad. Rabbi Yehuda would admit you only pay for the grain and you don't pay for what was hidden in there. Chitin v'higdish, or unless he gave him space to stack wheat and he did barley. So oren v'higdish litin, barley and he did wheat. Chitin v'chipan b'soren, wheat and he covered it with barley. So oren v'chipan b'chitim, barley covered it with wheat. In all those cases, he only pays for the barley because the person can claim, I gave you space for barley, or I thought you were watching barley. I thought I was watching barley. I didn't realize I needed the extra watching for wheat because wheat is more expensive than barley. Says Rava, I know in dinar zav wa isha. Let's say a man gives a gold coin to a woman. It's interesting that when the Shulchan Aruch brings down this halacha, it deletes the word woman. Just as generally speaking, a person gives a gold coin, and he says to her, "Kisari bo shel kesef, be careful about this coin. It's silver," meaning to say he didn't tell her it was gold. He told her it was silver. He's ikaso, and then if she goes ahead and actively damages it, Mishalemes dinar zav, she has to pay the full value of the gold. Why? Mishum da amrla, because he could say to her, "My havilech gabe de azakte." Because who told you to go out and damage my property? So what's the difference if you thought it was silver? It was gold. You damaged it intentionally. You're responsible to pay for it. But let's say she was negligent, then Mishalem Mishal Kesef. Then she only pays the silver. Why? The Amrulai, she says to him, the Tirusa de Kaspa Kibilai. I accepted upon myself to watch silver. I didn't realize it was gold. I would have given an extra level of protection. I didn't realize it had that much exposure. So Mordechai says to Rav Ashi, you thought that this was a statement of Rava. That's how you repeated it. But Anami Masnisim Pshitulam. But we have this case from our Brisa. We have the case from a Brisa. And what's the Brisa? We just said it. Chitin v'chipam b'sorim. He thought you were watching wheat, but he put barley on it. So orim v'chipam b'chitin, or barley and covered it with wheat. And then you burnt it You only pay for the barley. Alma, Amar way. So we see from here, he could say to him, the Turusa de Sairi Kibili Alai. I thought I was watching the barley. I didn't realize I was watching the wheat, and therefore I'm only responsible to pay for the barley. Hachinami Amar way. Here too, she could say to him in the case where she was negligent, the Tirusa de Dahava Kibili Alai. I didn't accept upon myself to watch the gold. I only accepted the silver. Amarav Shamis Milse Rav Yehuda. So remember, we've been saying many times that Rav Yehuda says Tamam Ba'esh, and if it was covered, and then the fire burnt it, Rav Yehuda says you're liable. But now Rav says Shamis Milse Rav Yehuda. I heard a teaching to Rav Yehuda, V'lo Yadana Mai, but I don't remember what the teaching is. And Amar Shmuel V'lo Yada Abba Mai Shmuel Rav Yehuda. You didn't know what Rav Yehuda taught. You didn't hear this teaching. And what did he say? The mechayev on this according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're responsible if something is covered up and then you cause the fire to burn it. Also, takonas nigzal v'isha. According to that position of Rabbi Yehuda, we made what's called the takonas nigzal, and we did it on his fire. What's the takonas nigzal? If somebody had something stolen from them, somebody broke into somebody's car, he could say, in my car, I had $1 million and you stole it. And so they say that this is one of the cases where we say, nishba v'notel, you could swear and take the money. Usually you swear and you don't have to pay. But by here, and also by a worker who says he wasn't paid, and also by this case of fire, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you could swear that you had something very valuable in there and take the money from the person who you're making the claim against. So that's the teaching that Shmuel says that Rav had heard, but he forgot. So by Meimer, asks the following question: also takeanas nigzal b'masor olo. What about a case of a masor? A masor is a moiser. Somebody hands somebody over to the wicked authorities, and he causes the Jew to lose money. But now somehow he's able to recover the money from this moiser, but he makes the claim that this guy cost him a lot of money. So do we do this principle of nakanas nigzal? Do we allow the person who lost the money to swear and then collect the money? Or do we not apply it? So I'll leave it to We've had this discussion many times in this chapter already that there's a law of garmi. A garmi is similar to grama, which is something that's called indirect damage. So according to the one who says that we don't say you're responsible if it's indirect damage, you don't have to pay for indirect damages. Well, then there's no question here. Well, if the guy caused you loss of money by giving over information to the government, that's called garmi. That's not direct. That's indirect damage. And so therefore, since it's indirect damage, you're not entitled to sue him for money. It's only a question, according to the one who says we do adjudicate this case of garmi, that we do say that you can make a claim for indirect damages and collect it. According to that approach, do we allow you to take this case of takonas nigzal? Do we allow you to take an oath by a meiser and say he cost me $1 million and thereby collect it or not? And the Gemara says teku. But what does teku mean here? Usually teku means we leave the question unresolved and we go strict. But what's the strict case here? So one opinion is that you're yachloku, that you split it. Another opinion is that teku here means that motzmi chavera olav haraya, which is another concept we had. We had both these concepts, that if you want money from somebody, you have to bring proof. And since there's no proof, you leave it unresolved. You don't get it. Hahu Gaver, there was a man, there was a man who basically kicked or threw his friend had a silver box. He used to store stuff in it, store valuables in it. And Shajib bin Ara, he threw it into the river. So he basically did an assault on his silver box and threw it in the river. Also married, so the owner of the box came along. He said, I had a lot of stuff in it. So is he allowed to swear and take the money? Yosef Ravashi Ravashi was looking at this question and he was unsure. He says, in this case, what's the Isn't this in fact the case of our Mishnah? The Tanan. Didn't we learn in our Mishnah? Modim Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda, b'madlakas abira shemeshalim, Isn't this the case of our Mishnah that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda that you can that you could burn a house, and if somebody burns a house, then you have to pay for everything in the house. The Chachamim even agree with Rabbi Yehuda because that people typically put things in their house. So too here also people have money in their silver boxes, so therefore of course you have to pay it. So Rav Ashi said back to Ravina, no, Amrei Idika. Or no, it was not Rav Ashi responding. It was Rav Achabrei the Rabba responding back to Ravina. He said, yeah, if he was making a claim for cash, but Hacha the Kamtain Marganita. Here he's making a claim for precious jewels. The question is, does the man put his precious jewels in this kaspata type of box or not? And take it. The Gemara leaves it under unresolved. The next question, the Gemara says, let's say the guy says, you burnt down my home and I had a nice silver cup in there. So what's the halacha? He says, Chazina, we look at it, if it's a very wealthy man, the Islay Kasa, the Kaspa most likely has a silver cup there, or Inami Inish Mehemnahu, or if he's a person who's generally trusted, the Mifak, the Inshi Gabe, that people will therefore put their deposits with him, then in that case, do takonas nigzal and mishtabeh v'shakol. He can take an oath and take it. But if he doesn't have, there isn't the likelihood that he has this type of item in his house. Lav kol kamini. We're not going to give him any credence to this claim. I just want to say, I heard I was listening to Rabbi Elephant's podcast, and he cited a tshuva about the following case. The case was a man went out. This was a contemporary question. A man went out away for a few months, and he asked his friend to go check on his apartment once a week and make sure everything was okay. So the guy comes in the first week, and he sees the freezer is running. And he looks inside the freezer. He sees there's almost nothing there. So he shuts off the freezer and to save the guy a few shkolim. But then the guy comes back the next week, and he smells this terrible smell. The friend who's watching the house, and he sees that there's a chicken that's rotting in the freezer that he missed. So he takes the chicken and he throws it out. Then the guy comes back a couple months later, and he opens up the freezer and he goes running to his friend. He says, "Where's my chicken?" He says, "Well, your chicken was rotting, so I threw it out." He says, I used to hide all my diamonds inside the chicken, and so that's where my chicken was. So that's why I kept the chicken in the freezer. Why'd you throw out my diamonds? I didn't tell you to throw out the stuff from my chicken. I didn't tell you to throw out my chicken. So is the guy who threw out the chicken, is he responsible to pay for all the diamonds? So they went to Rav Lo, and Rav Lo said, since even though you might first glance think that, how do we apply which of these cases here? But if you think that there's no way that this guy would have ever stored diamonds in the chicken, then he has no claim then he's not responsible for the diamonds, and the guy who owned the diamonds out of luck. He can't make a claim against the guy who threw out his diamonds. Amalei Ravada Bray the Ravavi or Ravashi. So Ravada, the son of Ravavi, said to Ravashi, "Ma ben Gazlan and Chamson." What's the difference between a Gazlan? And now, why do we care what's a Gazlan? Because the Gazlan, if somebody stole from you, you could take this oath and collect the money. And a Chamson is somebody who also takes something, but he takes it in a different manner. So Amalei, the difference is Chamson you have to make. The Chamson pays for it. He says, "I'll pay you the money. You give it to me." Gazlan will Yav Demei. The Gazlan doesn't pay, he just takes it. So I'm away, Yav Demei. Well, if he takes the money, Chamsin Karaslay, do we call him a Chamsin? V'amar Avuna Tahua, if he hangs the guy upside down. V'zabin, and then he buys it, Zabina, it's a valid sale. So the Gemara says, Lokasha, Hada Marotzani, Hada Lo Marotzani. No, so one is where he says, at the end of the day, I want to sell it, then he's not called a Chamsin. And in the other case, he doesn't say, I want to sell it, then the guy who takes it's called a Chamsin. The poskim discuss, is there a distinction between if you use force to compel him saying, I want to do it, or if you don't use force? That's a big discussion amongst the poskim. Now we come to the last Mishnah in Bava Kamma in Parak HaKoines, in this first 6 chapters of Bava Kamma, which discuss money that does damage. Your money does damage. So gates. So let's say you have a spark. A spark goes out of your hammer. The hizik and it causes damage. Chayiv. Then you're responsible for the damage of your spark. But if it was a gamal, if your camel, shayaton, pishtan, that was carrying the flax of our Bereshut Sarabim, and it goes into the public domain. And then his flax goes into the shop. And he lights up the flame of the shopkeeper. And he lights up the house. Then the owner of the camel is going to be responsible for the fire that he caused because his camel was negligent. So let's say the shopkeeper put his flame outside in public, then the shopkeeper is responsible. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, B'ner Chanukah potter. Rabbi Yehuda says, by the light of Chanukah, you're going to be potter. So because by Chanukah, it's a mitzvah to publicize the miracle. So the Mishnah mentions Hanukkah 7 places. In 7 places, the Mishnah mentions Hanukkah, but they're all cases where they're just mentioning it like en passant. Like, for example, you could bring the Bikurim until Hanukkah. But they don't give us the halachos of Hanukkah. This is the case where this is the only case in Mishnah where we're learning the halachos of Hanukkah, that you have to light the candle outside and to be mefaresim the names, to publicize the miracle. Why does the Mishnah not mention Hanukkah? There's a lot of different discussion, a lot of different theories. One of theory is that Hanukkah was about a rebellion story where they rebelled against the Greeks, and so therefore the Mishnah is being written right after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and there would have been concern if we highlighted in the Mishnah the rebellion story, the rabbi that might have been censored out. So they self-censorship, or else censored by the Romans themselves. Amar Avina Mishmei de Rava Shma Mina Mid Rabbi Yehuda Ner Chanukah Mitzvah Anicha B'Sochasar. We see from Rabbi Yehuda's halacha that it's a mitzvah to put the candle within 10 tefachim of the ground. 10 tefachim is very short, 40 inches. These sakadai telchem ma'al because if you want to say you could put it above 10 tefachim, Amay Amar Rabbi Yehuda Ner Chanukah Pater. Why would Rabbi Yehuda say that the Ner Chanukah is exempt? Anyway, the owner of the camel could have claimed, you could have put the rofa, you should put it above the camel and its rider, and then you wouldn't have had a problem. And we see from here, it's a mitzvah to place it within 10 tefachim. No, I'd say to you, even above 10 tefachim, it's a mitzvah. You can even do the mitzvah above 10 tefachim. And my Amr said, what was your claim? That the guy could have said, the owner of the camel said you should have put it above the camel, the rochva, and above its rider. No, we're not going to let him make that claim. Since he's doing a mitzvah, the rabbis didn't make him go out of the way. But that's only by Chanukah. But what about a sukkah? No, a sukkah, the Raspa points out, you wouldn't have the ability to put the sukkah, because specific to the mitzvah of Chanukah is putting it in public. But the sukkah is not specific to the mitzvah; is putting it in public. Part of pursuing Isa is by Chanukah, but not by sukkah. Amrav Kahana Darash Rabbi Nasim Bar Minyumi Mishmei Rabbi Tanchum Ner Chanukah Sheinicho Amal Me'asr Amos Psua. Ner Chanukah that you put above 20 amos is disqualified. 20 amos is very high; it's 30 feet off the ground. But Kisukah Kamavoy, we learn the same halacha as sukkah, that it's the first stop in sukkah. If it's too high above the ground, it's disqualified. And a mavoy is a pole that you put up to mark that before you go from the Reshut HaYachid into the Reshut HaRabim. And so therefore that beam cannot be above 20 amos. It's a heker. If it's supposed to be a reminder, and if it's above 20 amos, you're not going to notice it, and so therefore it's not going to be okay. We finished the first chapter, the 6th chapter of Hakones, finished the 6th chapter of Bava Kamma, which is called Hakones. And not only that, we've also finished the first 61 pages, which are really a discussion of when your money causes damages. And now we go on to the next chapter, which is really a discussion of theft. So the Mishnah tells us Meruba. This is the classic chapter called Meruba, the chapter of Meruba, the 7th chapter of Bava Kamma. We know, as a background to this chapter, we know that there are 2 separate halachos. There's a law that if you steal something from somebody, you have to pay it back. If you're a gana, if you steal it back and then they come and they find in your possession, you have to pay back double the amount. But if you stole an ox, a sheep or an ox, and then you sell it and slaughter it, you have to pay back 4 times the price of the sheep and 5 times the price of the ox. So it says our Mishnah, Meruba midas tashlumi kefal midas tashlumi arba v'chamisha, that the aspect of paying double has an extra element to it, which the aspect of paying 4 or 5 times the amount by a sheep or an ox does not have. Shemidas Tashlumi Kefal, because the paying of double, no heges, applies. The aspect of paying double applies whether or not the object that the person stole is alive or not. Whereas paying 4 or 5 times the amount only applies to an ox or a sheep. As it says, if a person steals an ox or a sheep and he slaughters it or sells it. Let's say Reuben stole something from Shimon. And let's say Shimon stole something from Reuben, and then Levi comes along and steals it from Shimon before Reuben is able to recover from Shimon, obviously. Then Levi does not pay back double to Shimon. So if somebody steals from a thief, he does not pay double. Also, if Shimon had stolen a sheep or an ox, and then Levi stole it from Shimon, and he slaughtered it or sold it, he doesn't pay 4 or 5 times the amount. Only if you steal it from the owner who didn't steal it himself, do you pay kefo or arba v'chamisha? Gemara says ve'elu midas tashlumi kefel no heges bein beganav bein betanas ganav. So umidas tashlumi arba v'chamisha ain't no heges el beganav bavad. So well, Katani. So the Gemara is asking. You said that this is where the law of kefil of double has an extra law over the law of paying 4 or 5 times the amount. But I'll give you another example. By kefil, let's say the person has a pledge that was placed in his possession and he claims it was stolen, and then we discover it wasn't stolen. He's the one who stole it. He had it there the whole time. He has to pay double, but the law of kefil applies there. But if a person had been given a sheep or an ox in his possession, and then he claimed it was stolen, but in fact he is the one who stole it and slaughtered it, he does not pay 4 or 5 times the amount. So our Mishnah does not list that case. So that must be that our Mishnah is support for Rabbi Bar Abba. Must be support for Rabbi Bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who says, if a guy has a pledge and he claims it was stolen, he pays double. So let us say that our Mishnah is saying that our Mishnah is like the statement of Rabbi Yochanan that the law of 4 or 5 times the amount would apply in this case. That if he claims it was stolen, he pays double, and if he claims it was stolen and then slaughtered, he pays 4 or 5 times the amount. From the fact that our Mishnah doesn't say that this is a distinction between kefah and arba chamisha, must be that this law of Rabbi Yochanan that arba chamisha applies to somebody who has a pledge in his possession. So the Gemara says, or alternative version of this discussion, maybe our Mishnah is support for Rabbi Bar Abba. Maybe it's a support for this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan that the law of Arba Chamisha even applies to somebody who claims it was stolen from his possession. The Gemara says, no, mi katani ein bain. It doesn't say in our Mishnah that there's no other distinctions. We have this ein bain Mishnayos, like there are these other Mishnayos which are ein bain. No, it doesn't say the ein bain. These are not the. It doesn't say that this is the only distinction. Meruba katani. It just says that this is an area where kefil has an extra law over Arba Chamisha. Tana v'shir. The Tana listed one and he left over others. There are others, so you can't draw this distinction. Tosos and the commentaries say, but normally whenever you say Tana v'shir, the next question in the Gemara is my shir da'ai shir. What else did it leave over? And here it doesn't list it. So someone to say it's because the case meruba means that the language meruba implies that this is just one area. It's not saying that these are all the areas. Okay, so Shemidas Tashumi Kefal Noagas, that the law of Kefal applies by every object, not just by a living object. So the Gemara says, how do we know the law of Kefal applies? How do we know the law that you pay double if you're a thief and you stole and it's found in your possession? The Gemara says, the Torah Rabbanan, we learn out from the following case. I'll call Devar Pesha for every sin that you do. You have to pay double. It says in the verse, I'll call Devar Pesha, I'll share Chamar al Seh, I'll call Sam, I'll call Aveda. Ishalim Shnaim L'Reir, you pay double. So it says I'll call Devar Pesha, that's a call, that's a general rule. I'll share Chamar, for an ox and a donkey. I'll sell for a sheep. I'll sell them for clothing. That's a prat. That's a specific. I'll call aveda. Then it says for every lost object, chazer ukal goes back and gives a general rule. Kal prat to call. We have a general followed by a specific followed by a general. Iatadana okena prat. We just judge like the specific, which means to say ma prat before shtavar metaltal v'gufo mama. Just like the specific is something explicit, is something that can be moved, and it itself is money. I've called davar metaltal v'gufo mama. Anything that can be moved and it itself has a value, is a currency, is a commodity. Yatsu karkos, this excludes real estate. She'inon metaltal, and excludes real estate which can not be moved. And so Yatsu avadim. And so if you steal real estate, you don't pay double. Tosfos asks the question: how can you steal real estate? So Tosfos has two scenarios. One is where you just move the stakes. We have permanent stakes around the yeshiva that demonstrates what is the yeshiva's property. But if somebody moves the stakes, that's like stealing real estate. In other cases where you steal the vines from the ground. So the Tosfos gives two examples, but it's not simple how you could steal real estate. And Yatsu Avadim also excludes slaves. Shehukshul karkot. Slaves are like real estate. If you steal a slave, you don't pay double. Yatsu Shtaros also excludes a contract. Shafu Pisha Metalplin, even though it's a movable object, in Gufan Mammon. They themselves are not specifically money. Yatsa Hektish, and also excludes the case of where you steal from the temple because it says in the verse, you pay double to your friend, but the temple is not your friend, so you don't pay double. So the Gemara says, but maybe maybe just like the specific case is explicit, which is davar shenevelasa metame b'magama. So it's something that a carcass is metame by touching and carrying. I've called davar shenevelasa metame b'magama. I might think any case that you pay double as if you steal something which the carcass is metame by carrying and touching of ofo slow. But a bird is metame on the base abliya. You only become tame from a dead bird when you swallow it, not by carrying and touching it. So I might think so for a bird you don't pay double. Can you really pay this? Well, can you really say this? Well, samaksiv. So, but can you really say such a claim? Can you really say such a claim? But samaksiv. And it says salma, it says a clothing, and salma is not touching, but salma is not tummy by touching and carrying. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll explain the question differently. We're referring to living creatures. I might think it only applies to those animals. Something which is tummy by carrying and touching, that the law of kef applies to, but other things not. So the Gemara says, you know what? We'll stop here. God willing, pick this up. We'll pick this up, God willing, tomorrow's daf, and we'll stop here. Everybody has a great day. If anybody has any questions,